title this year is Blacks in the Labor Force, Breaking Barriers, Building Legacies. And Petaluma Blacks for Community Development is an organization that was started in 1978 by a black lady here in town, Gloria Robinson. She felt that the black families needed to come together and share their history and culture with the rest of the community. And she also wanted a place that we could have social events together. And so she went around town and she would corral every black person that she possibly could.
Well, it's all about community, isn't it?
Exactly, and try and get them involved. And so we started to have Black history programs, and then in the 80s we actually started to have exhibits here.
Annual means it happens from
mostly February, because February is Black History Month.
Yes.
And so we have extended it to March because March is Women's History Month.
Right.
And so we include some women's history also in our Black history.
Wow, we get double duty here
you
then.
You get double duty in that.
So we're going to be breaking barriers and building legacies.
It is about the labor force, and it is about sharing some of that history. I mean, this exhibit is not too large, but it doesn't include everything. It can't. But what we want to show is what Black Americans have contributed to our country, our history.
Let me have a sentence or two. I've not thought about this, but you got me kind of stimulated now. You have quite a distinguished year. You're up there in my age era, and so
a little older.
You probably, this isn't your first rodeo. You've probably done some other things. So
I have.
What, very briefly, has been your passion career?
This is my passion, doing the exhibits and the programs and stuff. My background is in accounting. My degree is in accounting, business administration.
Wow.
And so that's totally different from what this is.
But organizational skills, I think, would be a biggie, wouldn't
exactly.
it? You want ready to start the tour?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's see. Let's start with the Black history. I want to leave the history from Petaluma to our end because I want to talk about that a little more.
Okay, we'll save the good stuff for the end, but
yes.
start off and get people stimulated here.
Yes. So we all know about, I shouldn't say we all know, we all have a little information about how Black people initially came to the United States,
right,
or actually to the colonies. And we'll see some more of that over on the other side of this board.
Okay.
But this board actually shows you some of the, actually 16 of the major buildings within the United States that were built are being helped to be built by slaves.
Oh, wow. You want me to kind of zoom in on some of the pictures?
Yeah, you can zoom in on those.
Okay.
Because
where do you want to start?
That includes the White House,
the
U.S. Capitol,
the White House, there she be.
Trinity Church. So you can just pan all of them because the interesting thing about this.
What's this one here? Oh, Smithsonian.
Yes.
So we're back in D.C. territory.
Yes.
Okay. And
I call that building the castle.
Now we're in New York City.
Exactly.
Here. Okay. And more New York City. What is this one here? Is that Francis?
Yes.
Tavern
in New York.
Okay. Now we're in Boston.
And Wall Street.
Wall Street Journal, no kidding. I wonder what contribution the Blacks made. Probably, were they sometimes Masons?
They were slaves. And the real key thing about the key thing about this is that they did the work.
Yes.
The slave owners got paid.
That's right. They got a board and room, and that was not a great deal, was it?
That was not a great deal for them.
What else do we have here?
And so this shows just some of them. This is 16 American landmarks built by slaves.
Okay.
And I know that Michelle Obama mentioned something about living in the White House and being able to wake up every morning
Her husband,
in a building
Barack, he went to Harvard, didn't he?
Yes.
Huh.
So living in the White House and being able to wake up there in a house that was built by slaves.
But I'm seeing a lot of these were like they're military installations, right? So as wars came,
was, yeah.
Yeah. the black slaves, I guess they said, okay, you know, they had a lot of manual labor things to do. And here we have Mount Vernon. Yeah, I think there's our first president came from that area. Georgetown University. Wonderful, good exhibits there. So the idea here we're trying to represent is that the blacks were very much involved with the construction of a lot of our monuments.
Building of our country, actually helping to build our country, even though a lot of times they didn't get recognized as that. And in fact, when Michelle Obama made that comment about waking up in the White House, a building that was built by slaves, a lot of people went to fact checked her, and realized, yeah, she told the truth.
Wonderful, what a great story.
Yeah,
yes.
She told the truth about that. And so this is just verbiage about the African Americans in the labor force.
Breaking barriers, building legacies. So what do you think the big takeaway is here from it? I mean, I can see where it talks about the Civil War and fighting for freedom, and they had some promises.
There were promises, and we will talk about that a little when we get on the other side of this board. But I think that it's important for people to understand, really, and even in showing this portion of it first, so that people understand that, yes, the slaves were there, but what is it that they contributed to our country?
Right.
How did they contribute? Not only their labor in the cotton fields and the tobacco and the sugarcane fields and stuff, but also what is it that they contributed? And so you see a little of that here.
That's a good start, a good prelude. Yes.
And then as the slaves were freed and they went into Reconstruction, the slaves were promised something during that time, because there were things set up that were supposed to help them get acclimated into the country, into the U.S. And they were offered, or they were told they were going to get 40 acres and a mule. Well, that didn't actually work out.
No, that was the promise. So
that
you were
was
right.
The promise. And so,
what do they say? It wasn't worth the paper that it wasn't written on.
Exactly. And so then during Reconstruction, we have a lot of things that happened during that time. And actually, convict leasing is that the freed slaves were actually, there were laws and stuff that said that they could not be standing or sitting on a place, and if they were put into jail, and they were made to go into a labor force. The men especially were put into labor at that. And so over on this side,
well, wait, there's more.
Yes, I don't want to do that yet.
Okay.
I want to go here.
We'll come back to this.
We'll come back to here, because this board actually, building a new nation, this starts with 1619.
Wow.
When the original slaves came over. I know that you probably heard about the New York Times Magazine report that was put out in 2019, and then the book that came out afterwards. But this is just a little of a background here in the history of what happened.
In school, I remember when they talked about Eli Whitney there.
Yes.
His invention, great. So a lot of things from a timeline perspective started
Yeah,
in
this is the time.
1619.
And we just went up to 1849.
All the way up to 1849.
On this one, but we also looked at some of the, what is an abolitionist?
Oh,
and
yes.
Some
right,
of the
about
abolitionists.
the abolitionist.
Yes.
To abolish.
And some of them, and there's some information there on Nate Turner also.
Look at this, the fugitive
slave law.
Slave law, isn't that something?
And
1793.
And then an actual, just a little depiction of the colonies, the 13
Oh,
colonies
okay.
that were
Yes. This was before the Louisiana Purchase.
there. Exactly.
I was, just as a quick an aside, is that in Georgia, I was going to go see the state. I was going to go to Disney World. I thought, I should go and take a look at that. And I thought, go by Georgia. I was looking at a book on Georgia, and they were going to call it the Utopia State. Utopia State, because they said they didn't want lawyers in the state, or, the Catholics, they were kind of harsh, so they didn't want Catholics in the state. But, that was one of the last of the states that finally said, okay, we're going to have slaves. They didn't like that idea initially, but all the states around them, the farmers were taking the sweat equity off of the blacks, and they were like saying, okay, making more money. So ultimately, the legislature gave in. It was nice that they resisted it for some time.
Yeah. So this is really, you saw that, the picture of like the original 13 colonies. And some people ask, well, did slaves actually rebel? Because you don't hear about that a lot. So we've got a lot of the
background stories.
The background stories.
People that were saying is that, enough is enough in wanting to have a better world.
Exactly.
Because, hey, after all, we were supposed to be a nation of freedom, so they thought we want to be free too.
Exactly. Okay, so then we're going to go back around. I wanted to use that board because it shows a lot. And then here is just 5 black leaders that shaped the labor movement.
No kidding. Oh, these are the top 5, you thought, huh?
Yes. Amir McLeod Bethune. We got a black school. She did a lot with $1.50.
Really? Which one you want to go to next?
Actually, Hattie Canty.
Okay.
She moved to Las Vegas and she actually started a labor union. So we were talking about blacks in the labor force.
Yes.
Some of these people actually started labor
unions.
A
labor union.
Yes. And A. Philip Randolph, the Pullman's labor union. We'll have to talk about that a lot later.
For those who don't know what a Pullman, what would you think of as a Pullman?
Those guys were people who worked on the railroad.
Right. Yes.
They took care of all of the necessities for people. And Mr. Pullman, who actually started the Pullman train or carriages, he actually built them, and they were luxury places, and these black people worked in them, and he actually hired blacks because he said from slavery they knew how to take care of people and how to treat them. And so Mr. Randolph was the first person who started this union, and that union is actually 100 years old this year.
Oh, is that right?
It's 100 years
Pullman
old.
100-year anniversary.
Yeah.
How about that?
This one is really interesting because this is Chris Small with Amazon. This is more recent.
Oh, okay.
This is a young man who wanted to unionize, actually, Amazon.
Yes, right.
And so our kids and stuff, our young people got a real kick out of reading about him and learning something about him. That's a short version of it, but there's a lot more
so it actually comes up to modern times here in terms of,
And then this whole thing is about, this whole portion of the exhibit is about mostly the Colored National Labor Union, which was one of the first unions. You have to remember that the people coming out of slavery, or black people, were not allowed a lot of times to join the white unions. They were not.
They were segregated, weren't they?
They were segregated from that, so they actually had to start their own. And so that's why you have some of the unions that we have today. And eventually they did combine a lot of them.
I can see it's very well researched. You talk about some of the
I didn't mention that because...
Wow, there's a lot of details here.
We start off in August. Every year we start in August looking at, number one, what's our theme going to be, and number two, looking at the information that we're going to put into that. And so we start to do our research. So everything that we do is research. It's actually looked up. We buy a lot of books. We read a lot of books. And we spend a lot of time in the library and working with our librarians and stuff to try and make sure that the information that we're giving is correct.
And speaking of which, this is just not for Petaluma people. We're in Sonoma County, and you said there are elementary students who Forestville or places like that would actually come here.
Comes and
so you give them a tour.
We give them a tour. And the other thing I should have said that was when I was talking about Petaluma Blacks is that It does say Petaluma Blacks. It's not just Black people that are a part of this organization. It's community members who really care about the work that we're doing, and they join us. So this exhibit is not set up by Black people in general. It's set up by anybody who wants to work on it. So we put the call out there, and people join us.
Just as a for instance, we spoke earlier before we started recording about next month and Asians, right? So there's different themes each month here at the library museum, and so now you do some things up in Santa Rosa too, don't you?
We do, and we also try, well, Juneteenth celebration, Kwanzaa. We do Kwanzaa up in that area and stuff. There's a lot of things that go on in Sonoma County in general. I think that Petaluma Blacks has the largest exhibit and Black History program each year. And so we try to bring as many people into that as possible. So we're going to go back to this piece right here. So we talked about this, about our
all the different constructions.
and there's 16 of them there, but that's not all of them. Okay. And so here we're talking about, I know that most people have talked about Sojourner Truth and also Harriet Tubman. We wanted to make sure that, because we are into March, into Women's History Month, we wanted to make sure that we covered some of that. We have some more information, more recent. But women in work. So a lot of times, even there were the washwomen and stuff who originally started. My mom was a maid, and
where was she living?
In Louisiana. And she worked for women and took care of their house and their children and stuff. And so we wanted to give credence and make sure that people understood. And so this information is about some of that. You can't cover everything, but you can at least put down a little information. And winning the better wages. These women actually went out and they unionized themselves.
They did on their own, huh?
They did on their own.
You know, it's good to see what the smart money is doing and then kind of do the same.
Yes. And over here it's just a little something that has nothing to do with the labor force. Other than the fact that this is a picture of Gloria Robinson, our founder.
Oh, okay.
And these are some baskets from...
Tell me a little bit about her wardrobe there. I can't
she
help
has
but notice that.
Oh my gosh, she has on a beautiful African a little robe there that she likes to wear. Gloria's
Would those be made out of cotton?
Mostly cotton.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly cotton.
I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Gloria right now is ill. She's
sorry.
And we're really praying that she will get better. These are baskets that I got in South Carolina.
My goodness.
They are.
Look at those are really high quality.
They are very unique in the fact that how they're I watched the people make the baskets, not these two, but make similar baskets and stuff. And so they're called a sweetgrass. And so they are still handmade.
Well, thank you.
And then that's just another picture of
Nika Giovanni?
Yes, the writer.
Oh, okay.
So this is on Sojourner Truth, but Nika Giovanni wrote about her and stuff. And so that's just a poster that we had, that we got.
Look at me. Aren't I a woman? Nobody ever helped me into carriages or over mud puddles or gave me any best place.
And that's what...
Aren't I a woman?
Yes, because you have to come back over here because there was a couple of different versions of that. She was actually... some people say that she would not have spoken in that broken English as this one said, but we don't know. And so what we tried to do was put up both versions of that speech.
And you know something? Clever women like her, they could speak in broken English if and when they thought would be appropriate to the right audience. So, yeah, I have a hunch is that some people may have different agendas when they say what she spoke at, but
Yeah.
my
But
sense is she could probably speak
Yeah.
at whole different levels.
It's interesting to just put up both to see, you
And
know.
isn't that true with you when you think about it?
Yes.
Is that, you know, when you're talking to the kids, you're going to speak one way. When you were in the banking industry,
Yes.
the bank executives, you had a little different
Exactly,
protocol.
exactly. So over on this board, we have a couple of graphs and stuff that we took from our government, which showed shares of the black labor force by age group, black labor force as a percentage of total, the whole total in the United States. And you know what's really interesting about this information is that it goes out to what they think 2026 is
Oh, okay,
going.
so they have
This
some
was published.
forecast. Uh-huh.
Actually, this was published like in 2019, I think it was. But you can see where they thought.
Yeah,
I
so
wonder if anybody.
We're in 1972, by the way, it was
Yeah.
10%. And
And it
here we
goes
can
up.
see 10 is going upwards of
13% of the total labor
So,
force.
Yes.
So we will keep these and see what happens next
Right.
year if that is actually published
And here's by age, I guess, that
Yeah.
is the share of, so.
by age,
We see that the red is the big area, which would be
the 25 to
25 to
54.
54 years of age, okay? And then there's the people like us, 65 and older. Well, look at that. There you go, you're in that
And,
one
and
there. You're helping,
there's a
you're helping
lot
get up
of
there.
older people still working, and it, you know,
Yes.
some of it is because they need to, others is because they feel needed and needing to
Well,
be a part of something.
I get the feeling you want to make the world a better
Exactly.
place.
Yep. And so this piece right here was something that I just happened to think about is
Oh,
the
whitewashing
whitewashing
black
black
music.
music. And basically what it is that a black person would do a song or something and someone else would come behind them and
Right.
do it. And then it would be as if they created that or they made it initially. And this lady, Big Mama Thornton, did the the song that Hound Dog.
Yes, I
She
saw that
did
hound
the
dog
Hound
there.
Dog.
Oh, okay.
And you know who did that after her
Yes.
was Elvis Presley.
Right.
And so
Ain't
he
nothing
is
but a hound dog.
he is
Very
considered
famous.
the creator and stuff of that, but not really. Not see, these are facts that people don't really
Don't appreciate.
don't know.
Like in the entertainment industry, like
Yeah.
Sammy Davis Jr. things, you know,
Yeah.
it took Frank Sinatra to say, hey, if we're not going to have him be in a lesser position than I am.
Exactly. And so over here, we always put up Lift Every Voice and Sing because it is considered the Negro National Anthem. And so it was in 1899 that James Weldon Johnson wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing, which he said to music by his brother. And it's used as the Negro National Anthem. It was really written as a poem originally, but it's, you know, his
It's
brother
interesting how things morph into being,
yeah,
yes.
put it together for music, so.
Because I think you were saying earlier about how telling stories, and oftentimes, you know, oral tradition through songs were how people remembered things.
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of our history is passed down through, you know, the storytelling. Our parents were really, really big on that. And over here is just a little about the Great Migration. So when black people started to move from the farms and stuff, that was the 1910 through 1970, and a lot of people came out either. And this is this little map shows you. So they went from the south up to the north, and they came over west from the migration from there. And this was the industrial area when things
Yes.
were becoming more industrialized. And then in the 1970s, we had a reverse migration, which most people don't even realize that we did, because a lot of black families moved back to the South. They found that they could live there a lot more comfortably because of the cost of living and stuff
Right.
in the South, and so they moved back to their back to where the family originally came from. And then these are just pictures during that migration of people in the train stations and stuff. And then this tells you the top causes of the Great Migration. Basically, it was because of a lot of the Jim Crow laws and stuff. We didn't focus on that. In this exhibit, we did. And one of the other ones when we did on the resistance of black people, but it was really because of a lot of the Jim Crow laws that were written that kept them from having what they needed in order to be able to survive.
Well, it's good
and
that
the
we
way
have,
they were treated.
Oh yes, the way they were treated. I was going to say, in about 1963, my parents were going to go from Redding, California, across to the East Coast. We were going to go to the World's Fair. And we were going through the South, and I saw a drinking fountain, and I was like, I was curious. The sign said colored water, and I
No,
ran
it's
the
for
water.
colored people.
Yeah, I thought, is it like chocolate water? What's it going to be? And it was,
No.
you know, I guess it was saying is that would be their drinking fountain.
Exactly.
And I'm glad we've gotten beyond those.
Yeah, exactly.
Stigmas.
That had to do with the Jim Crow laws.
That's
and stuff.
right.
And also during this time, there were boll weavers in the cotton fields
Yes,
and
there
stuff
were.
that had created a lot of problems. And the industries were growing up. You know, things were changing. So that is the action. We did a lot more on the migration doing one of our other exhibits, but this is just to indicate about the labor force, the black labor force, and where it actually went from the South.
Well, thank you. That's very good about the migratory states.
Yeah, my family actually moved here doing, my dad, I was born after the war was over, but my dad and my mom and my two siblings moved to California for him to work in the shipyard during the war.
They're right, because obviously the World War II and Vallejo over there with the Mare Island shipyard was a huge opportunity.
Exactly. We're going to skip this for now.
But we're
going to come back to it.
Okay. And
we're going to come back to it. Okay, so these are just a couple of the people who are black people who are in the labor force now, who've done some major things. William Bill Lucy, board member, Emeritus, National Board of Directors for the NAACP. He worked in the NAACP for a long time.
For those who aren't aware, why don't you give us what the acronym is for
National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
Colored people, right.
And it's not like our organization, one that's just colored people or black people.
Right.
NBC News 2017, David White, since he served as National Executive Director of the Screen Actors Guild.
Really?
And there's
Director.
Something that says how many people he's involved in. I'm not sure if we captured that or not.
Okay. But further study, I don't see the numbers there, but certainly, the fact that he had a critical position.
And so here we are talking about the Pullmans again. And we focused on this because this was the 100th year that they've been, this union has been in effect.
And it's always important that we differentiate ourselves, and as you said earlier, the fact is that they had wonderful manners. They were very polite. They worked hard, and they really differentiated the management companies for the railroads.
And that was the reason that they were hired, is because of the way that they had been trained and stuff. And this Mr. Pullman, I think his name was George, felt like the black people would service the people that he wanted to be served, the way that he wanted them to be served. And he made these cars that hooked onto the railway. And there's a picture, I think, of one somewhere in one of our boards, it's not this one, that shows some of the Pullmans work helping somebody put up, this one.
Okay, yeah, there we go.
Making up an upper berth.
Interesting how it was. the iron horse, as they called it, how it was able, rather than to have to come out on a wagon and
Yes.
make it out if you're lucky, is it actually allowed for mass transportation.
And when I was talking about our exhibit being made up of people in the community, this whole thing here was made up by one of the ladies who's a part of our group, and this was actually her grandfather.
Oh, and she kept the hat. Look at that.
Well, one of her cousins actually is the owner, and she got it from her. But it just tells a lot about their family. Oh, here it is. If you can get a picture of that. The Pullmans that are, can you see that?
Yes,
one?
I can.
Down there helping.
Pretty
serving.
luxurious living considering being on a wagon or a horse or walking.
Exactly. And how the trains were actually built. They would actually hook them on. Mr. Pullman owned those, and he would rent them or sell them to people, and they would hook onto the train.
But I guess people should know there was a lot of it was freight cars, but if you wanted to have passenger cars, and especially sleeping cars, that would be a whole nother thing, wouldn't it, to have to add those? So,
and
did Mr. Pullman, did he actually own those then?
He owned them, so he would either rent them out or he would sell them to people, and they would have them. And our presidents and our officials and stuff, this is the way they traveled with those.
Well, thank you.
But
Anything
this
else?
is really very
interesting. There's so much to see here. Yeah, it'd take more than an hour to do it justice to get there.
Yes, you have to spend some time reading the information and stuff. So we're going to walk over to the part. Well, let's do the back part first, and then we're going to save the best for last.
Okay, finally, you've given us the hook. Now we're going to get to the...
So when I said earlier that we had something on women, because it is women of color in the labor force, and all of these are books. I love using a lot of books in our exhibits because that helps people understand, and maybe sometimes it will give them a chance to look up some of the books that we have. And a lot of these books are in our library, and so, you know, if somebody wrote down a title or something, they could go back and go to the library and pick it up.
It's funny, it used to be I would want to say is which library, but because we're part of a county system, I guess they can be, so I say, if your library card, you can have it come there.
Exactly. I do that all the time.
Yes.
I will I will ask for a book, and if it's not in our library here in Petaluma, they get it for me from the other place. So here, Breaking Barriers is our title, but here we are, women.
Hey, I know this face here.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
Kamala
and
Harris.
probably this one too.
Oh, yes.
And her, because she was
Georgia.
Stacy.
Yeah, she just spoke at the Marine Center just a couple months ago, and she.
And the kids know her. Our kids who come in here know know that person.
Beyonce.
Yes.
What a singer.
Yes.
Well, a lot of them here. We can't go through all of them today, but yeah, if you have time.
Yeah.
A lot of trailblazers.
Yeah, and what I like about this is the lady who did this, she lives in Santa Rosa, and that's the other thing. Not everything in our exhibit is done by people in Petaluma.
Wait a second, it wasn't all done by you?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I love the way the community comes together and helps to put this together. We think of the theme, we give them little ideas of things that they can work on, and people will say, oh, I'll do this person and I'll do that person.
It's really about community.
It is community. It's perfect. And then this was done by one person who is not black, but has a real knack for picking out people that they want to be in the exhibit.
Super.
And so she put this whole section together of the women.
Speaking of labor, these things are a love of labor to put together. I hope that they can be saved for future years.
They are saved. In fact, I've been really kind of trying to figure out where else could this exhibit go.
Wow, it's overwhelming. There's so much here. Yes, great information.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Are we about there?
Yep. And so what we're going to do next is go over here and talk about Henry Chenault. Henry Chenault was a shoeshine man here in Petaluma. He died before I think it was 1969. He died before I came here. But his wife was still alive, and so Gloria Robinson, our founder, got a chance to know his wife. And his wife is the person who took her around and introduced her to people in Petaluma and also in the Santa Rosa area. But these are kind of things that he was called. He was called the top ambassador of goodwill, public relations extraordinaire, sidewalk philosopher. And I was just talking to someone, but he was also court-martialed, and which is the sad part about it. When he was stationed in Houston, when he was in the service, and he never told anybody about that part of his life. And it wasn't known until, I guess, a few years ago when John Sheehy was doing research and he came across this whole...
Is that part of his history?
That part of his history. And so people said, well, why didn't he tell people about it? This man lived at a time when black people were not valued.
Right,
and
treated fairly.
Are treated fairly. And so I feel like he knew if he had told anybody, he wouldn't have had the life here in Petaluma that he had.
Right.
And so he didn't say anything about that. And I don't think he wanted to be known for that. That's not what he did. That wasn't who he was. And he didn't create that issue for himself.
No.
Somebody else created.
Yeah.
Created that. And so this is about him. He owned his own home here. A couple of people have said, oh yeah, my mom used to drop me off at his shoe shine shop, and I'd spend the day talking to him. And while she went off and did her shopping or anything, I said, oh, and so he was a babysitter also. I didn't see that in any of the other things.
And here it looks like he received a certificate.
Yes, the Petaluma.
Congressional recognition.
Yes, and actually there's going to be... Bill Sobranis wrote about him constantly.
Yes.
And
for those who don't know, Bill Sobranis he was a real anchor for the Petaluma community.
Exactly.
I mean, not only a writer, but the creator of things like the wrist wrestling contest in Petaluma, which eventually went all the way across the world, and the home of the ugly dog contest. And so these things he created have went to other cities and states.
So Henry is going to be recognized downtown Petaluma. There's a group in the city who was looking into naming a part of a street after him, and also having a key marker there for him. And so the rest of the exhibit is really about Kwanzaa. I put that up every year because I want people to understand what each one of those days represent. My family usually recognizes Kwanzaa on the last day. And so...
well, very good. Yeah, it has a little bit of the religious, spiritual aspects.
Yes, and it's not a religious celebration, although you may think of it as one, but it is not. It wasn't created for that. It was just an acknowledgement of a black celebration. And so this is kind of Sonoma County history. I think I mentioned Reverend Coffey to you earlier. And Reverend Coffey, this young lady here was 5 years old then. She's about 25 now, and she works with our youth group. I didn't mention our youth group before. And we, along with our black history stuff, we have an actual youth group, Grapevine Youth Leadership. Reverend Coffey died some years ago, but just a great person to get to know. And over on this side is actually some of Petaluma. Well, actually black leaders who shaped local education. That was in the Press Democrat, and I kept it. I thought that information was absolutely wonderful.
My, you have quite a clipping service. I get the feeling you have many shoe boxes.
Not shoe boxes, boxes.
Big boxes.
And this is about Petaluma Blacks for Community Development. And this is a lot of the original people that were involved. There was I'm going to say about 25, 30 black families who actually started to work with us. And Some of them moved away some years ago when the housing changed. The houses were going up in here in value, and there were places like in Sacramento and other areas where you could buy a house for what you got from your house in
Yes,
Petaluma.
right.
And so a lot of people moved away. And there's also some history of Black History Month, so that people know how did this get started and the person who actually started it.
And to be the real deal, you must have the real seal. And so I see
Yes.
our mayor,
Our
Kevin,
proclamation.
he
Kevin.
has signed on the City of Proclamation, acknowledging all the wonderful things here
And
for
so-
our Black community.
And then this is 1980. This is my oldest son, who happens to be
Oh.
50-some years old now.
Huh.
We used to do like on Saturdays do like a school of helping our kids with their homework and reading and different stuff. And we would actually take them to different places, to the museums, like in San Francisco and in Oakland, so that they got to see what that was like, other than just being here in Petaluma. And then this is just an article that was in a paper by Dorothy Morris, who really worked with the seniors here in town. She passed away a couple of years ago.
A great legacy.
Yeah. And the last thing over here is some of the earlier. This is from the Board of Supervisors, the proclamation that they did. But these are some of the earlier Black people who lived actually in Petaluma.
You kind of would wonder about the variety of all the different labor and career opportunities.
Exactly,
That they had. I mean,
what they had.
obviously, it was a challenge for them to get an equal education, but some of them just through sweat equity, hard work, were able to achieve anyway.
Yes. And I actually wonder sometimes why that they come. And I have to say that for most of them, they lived in their own homes. Like in Santa Rosa, when you go back and do the research of the earlier Blacks in Santa Rosa, a lot of them lived in the homes of white families. These people, for the most part, lived in their own homes,
Okay.
their own places. And then there's a little chart there, the census of people. And the colored school in Petaluma was really interesting. And they actually had their own church too.
Nice church building, good for
I
them.
don't think it looks like that.
I was wondering myself, that's probably today, yes.
Yeah, that's the way that building looks today.
Today, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the tours. Any
You're very
final things you'd
welcome.
like to say? Is
I-
what
you know-
next?
What next?
Yeah.
Well, we have this was set up for our youth. It was our story time at the museum happened on February 15th. We had about 56 young people who showed up, and we read two stories. They had two stories. They also worked with the Sonoma County Children's Museum to make a quilt. That quilt was beautiful. I'll have to ask them what's going to happen to it. I think they were going to take it to the museum in Santa Rosa and maintain it there. But our last item is a lady who is going to be she's not going to be in Petaluma. There is a lecture on Petaluma Community Center on April 26th. She's going to be talking about riding Jim Crow, African American women on the American Railroad.
Okay.
Which is really, really
And where's
interesting.
that going to be held?
It's going to be at the Community Center on the 26th at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
It is a free, but it's so much information. I've read that book, and it's just exciting. I shouldn't say exciting, interesting to see how these women were treated because of their color on the train. So it's very interesting. Whereas we talked about earlier about the Pullmans. So the guys were the people who worked on the trains, but there were also women who worked on those trains also. And we don't hear a lot about that, but it is covered in the book. And so if you come to the lecture on the 26th, you'll hear a lot about that.
Okay, will there be a test after we hear the lecture?
Probably so.
Well, we better pay attention then, don't we?
Better pay attention.
Well, thank you so very much.
You're very welcome.
Faith Ross here at the Petaluma
Historical Library and Museum.
Yes, this is a great place, and you did a wonderful job, so thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
Okay, have a great day.